I think we basically should, from the creator's point of view, rethink how we create content and look at audio as a new opportunity. And
It
as
definitely hits us deeper.
the rest of us who are actually getting the content and trying to kind of fight with it,
Hmm.
we would really appreciate human beings explaining things to us when we're more available for that.
Welcome to Audio Branding, the hidden gem of marketing. I'm your host, Jody Krangle, and this podcast will discuss just how sound influences our behavior. I generally talk about this in the context of advertising and marketing, but there are other places this is important too. I really feel that it plays a much more important role in our lives than maybe we realize. So let's delve a little deeper. This is the second part of my interview with Tal Florentin. We discussed before that there are other places besides teaching sales teams or getting clients, potential clients, to understand what the selling points are of your whatever it is. But you mentioned audio for pre-surgery and that kind of thing. Like I've done a lot of narration for that, and I know that it's a big thing, and a lot of people who are in stressful environments are not necessarily taking in the information that they should be taking in. So
So
having that later.
pre-surgery model was one of the interesting ones because we have a project to work with a local hospital where
Mhm.
we kind of take the information that was aimed to send as a PDF document. You would probably get a text message saying, here is the information you need towards your surgery. And you would
Yeah.
have to open it in a browser in your smartphone
Mhm.
and then read a PDF document, which is not designed for being read easily from a smartphone, right? So you'd
Yeah.
have to kind of scroll over it and kind of maximize and try to read. And this is the
Mhm.
worst content you would ever have, right? Because you basically don't really want to know what's written there because you're scared.
Yeah.
Then comes the opportunity to actually let somebody else read it for you, or actually provide that information.
Mhm.
And one of the interesting uh, places there, which is again relevant to the Hebrew language, we have a different way of saying things in according to gender, which is
Okay.
where we found out that this would be a great opportunity to actually see what your gender is. We know that from the systems, so we can
Mhm.
actually send a different message to a female versus a male, and actually make it a much more personalized meeting point. And then
Mhm.
you start a conversation, which is a very interesting one around tone of voice. So, would this be a friend talking to you? In different cases, it would be, but in this
Mhm.
case, you need some kind of formality. And then you go into the problematic areas of whether this should be a female or a male voice, which is kind of,
Yeah.
it's never politically correct, but you have to go
Yeah.
to have a decision making there.
Sure.
But uh, and I have another insight for you. When we started
Sure.
to kind of have this conversation, so there's an interesting process there because we work with people who are used to edit text. And then
Okay.
before we do the reading, the recording, we ask them to approve the text. And then they try to read the text and they say, this is not serious enough. This can't be our formal text. We are a formal company. We have to
Mhm.
be very formal. But if I give this the formal text to my voice acting team, this would be horrible.
Yeah.
So I have to start explaining them that we have to change the tone of voice before recording that. So sometimes we do the recording just for them to understand that it's okay, and
Mhm.
then try
Yeah.
to understand that they have to edit the text differently. So we found out that there's a very good way to actually have this conversation. We started asking. Uh, it's a funny question. What type of shoes would you like the voice actor to wear when they record the text?
Oh, that's an interesting way to put it. Yeah.
So we created a visual where you see the
Uh-huh.
different types of shoes.
Okay.
I have to be honest and say that the male version is much more simple than the female version. I never kind of know how
Yeah, that doesn't
to do
surprise
that.
me.
But the male version, you have a very formal classic shoes on the formal version, which would be uh, a formal host in a formal, I don't know, government event.
Yes.
And then automatically they say, no, no, we don't want that. And this is a super interesting element because they just approve the
They
fact
just
that
said
they
they
don't
wanted more
want to
formal.
do
Yeah.
that. So then we move into sneakers and the different types of
Uh-huh.
sneakers
Mm-hmm.
and flip-flops. We put them just for them to say, oh no, this is too much, right? To kind
Yeah,
of define
okay.
the different barriers of where we can be.
Sure.
And then when we move to sneakers, good things happen because now we can actually talk like we talk right now, right? And then you say, this is nice. And
And
then what
different
happens is
sneakers
that
have
people actually find out that the company has human beings there, which is a nice thing, right?
Yeah,
So we can
that's
basically break
nice.
the ice and kind of the shoe thing kind of
Mm-hmm.
uh, broke the ice and made them understand what we didn't find any other way of getting into.
That's brilliant. I love that. What a great way to get them to think about it. Yeah. So much fun. Yeah, this strikes me as really complicated though, because, not only are you rewriting the summaries of these things, but you're considering tone of voice and you're considering the voice actors and then getting the edited audio back into the hands of whoever needs to put it online. And there's a lot that seems to go into that. So, yeah.
And we also
Um,
take care of the visual design of the interface, which is our platform, which is all about
yes.
allowing you to put audio, a branded audio player, and have make it yours, which is basically what the platform does. So,
Sure.
so our content services are kind of, you don't have to use them; you can do it on your own.
Hmm.
But the platform itself of Samurai is the go-to place where, when you would like to create audio first content, you basically have your kind of your branded player where you can adjust it to your brand identity and put your
Hmm.
cover image and host the content and kind of make it yours, and then just put it everywhere you need in your customer journey. So I think the
Yeah.
visual element is super important because one of the things I think we managed to deal with is another barrier podcasts have. Usually, podcasts are consumed in a podcast platform. So you have to
Hmm.
know where there's a discussion, where do you listen to your podcast? And each one has their own kind of favorite player. But all of these players are an apps. And right now, when a company wants to communicate with their audience, it wouldn't be a good idea to ask them to download another app. And not all of your
Yeah.
target audience is podcast oriented.
Yeah,
So
it's tricky. I think that's why people start mailing lists, like newsletters and mailing lists and that kind of thing. And I know that there are communities that people start up. I mean, they start them up on Facebook and LinkedIn groups and things like that, so you can have discussions around this kind of thing. But you're right that there's no central area for people to actually exchange messages with the person who created the content or discuss amongst themselves.
I'll give you a good example. If you would get the instructions toward a surgery, it would be very strange to send you to Spotify to listen to that,
Yeah.
right? This would be a
Yeah.
very strange
Yeah, it'd be a
journey.
little weird, yeah.
You would say, "Wow, this is strange." That something in
Well,
this
it's
state
not.
of mind is kind of, it's not related to that type
Yeah.
of place.
And it wouldn't seem to be private. Like if you're putting it out on Spotify, it's not a private discussion.
So we spend a lot of time kind of investing in creating a player for a web, which is a branded
Mhm.
player.
Mhm.
So it looks like an app, but you didn't download anything. So you had a link and it's opening on desktop and on mobile. But then comes
Mhm.
another element. Some people, this is really my overall journey of I think 3 years. So
Yeah.
I said audio is the next thing. So people started to say, but I want to read it. So I said, no, you don't. You want to listen to that. And I started to fight
Okay.
with them. And usually, as a user experience designer, you know that after you try to fight with people, you should listen to them at some point.
Mhm.
And,
Yeah.
and then I said, okay, let's put the text out there. And then we found out that some of them read and some of them listen. And then there's the third type who listen and read at the same time,
Oh,
which is kind of
interesting.
interesting. And I would assume that this is the elder audience,
Mm-hmm.
and I found out that this is the younger audience because
Oh,
they basically need their attention focused, and
to
only
get
when
whatever
two
they're going to get from it.
senses
Yeah.
are focused on the same content, I
Mm-hmm.
can actually keep them with the content. So they actually read and look at the kind of listen and read at the same time.
Yeah.
Uh, unless, of course, they're doing something else, which allows the secondary content consumption. But if they're
Sure.
available, they have the option of actually choosing what's best for them at the same point.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then our player kind of evolved by adding a call to action button. So, for example, I'll give you an idea coming from traveling. Uh, what if you're on your mobile phone and I just sent you instructions and you have to go somewhere?
Mm.
So then we add the call to action button of take me there, which opens your Google Maps, for example. So
Okay.
then
Yep.
it becomes your guided tour platform. So you can actually use it for guiding people get there and then listen to the instructions. So it's kind of it becomes an endless thing.
Yeah.
But the mechanism of that is kind of a different thing. It's not an audio player. It's not a text player.
Yeah.
It's something new. So we're basically trying to kind of understand what we created and see the different implementations of that. And
Mm-hmm.
as we move along, we find new ideas we can do with that, which is kind of super interesting to see this kind
Yeah.
of comes to life.
I mean, people were doing this with, like you said, guided tours. Like they'd give you a cassette tape and a pair of headphones, and you'd walk with this thing telling you what to do, right? Like, and that was only audio.
And the other way
So,
around of that would be to kind of bump into something physical
yeah.
and scan a QR code, which will lead you to the audio player of that, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it all suddenly makes sense because it's another element in your content options, which
Mm-hmm.
wasn't out there. So it could be a product you purchase on your supermarket, or it could be a statue on I don't know on in the middle of the street. You can actually learn more about,
Yeah.
and then you'll get that guided tour talking kind of guide talk to you and tell you everything you need to know, which would be
Yeah. It's a great idea. And what I love most about this is the summarization, because it summarizes the content of whatever article you're trying to learn more about or whatever information you're trying to learn and gives you the most important parts as opposed to you having to scan and
so
pick
I
out.
think 3 minutes is magical
Yeah.
in terms of audio. You can
Mm-hmm.
add so much content there, and it's good enough to actually hold a full piece. It's not too
Sure.
shallow. You can actually dive
Yeah.
into details, have an example, and then end it with an idea of saying, in the full article, you can get this and this and this if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
We were not trying to cover everything. Or
Yeah.
alternatively, create a playlist of, instead of one item, which is very long, cut it into 7 short items of 3 minutes. This would be a different type of kind of managing my time, because from my point of view, one of the hardest things is it happens in audiobooks. I download an
Mm-hmm.
audiobook. I really I'm dying to know what's in there, and then I'm downloading and I see the 9 hours and I'm saying, oh my god, where am I
That's a
going
big
to
commitment.
how I'm going to manage these 9 hours in the next?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's is it based on traffic jams that fill into 9 hours of
That's a lot of dishes to wash.
yeah. So I really have hard time there, and then I lose the motivation to start. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
look at
I
it
see
and
what you
say,
mean.
I'll never get through all of that, so let's not even start, which is kind of a bad
Yeah,
decision.
it's strange. Like I should love audiobooks. I should love them, but I find it hard too for almost the same reason that you do. And what happens to me is I'll start it and I'll listen for 30 minutes maybe, and then I'll get called away to do something else and I'll forget about it for like a month. I'll come back and listen to another 30 minutes. It just, and then by
So what
then,
if these 30 minutes could be the most effective elements of that content?
yeah.
And then we basically move into micro learning, which means that we're not stopping learning, we're just moving into a different type of learning.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, it kind of fits the type of learning that we need today, which is knowing a lot more about a lot more things.
Yeah.
Uh, and it doesn't replace the main thing that we have to kind of to know, but it allows me to go on and stay up to date.
Are you looking for ways to improve your company's or podcast's impact? You'd be surprised how powerful the use of an intentional audio branding strategy can be. Want to know more? I have a free downloadable PDF that gives you my 5 tips for implementing an intentional audio strategy at voiceoversandvocals.com/audio-branding-strategy. That location does ask to put you on a mailing list, just to send you updates on when the new podcasts come out. But if you really don't want to give your email out, I understand. Just contact me directly. My email is all over my website, and I'll make sure you get that PDF without needing to sign up anywhere. If you do sign up, though, you also get access to a resources section called The Studio, where I have videos, white papers, and PDFs, discounts from my guests, and snippets of audio from my guests that no one else gets to hear. So maybe it's worth your while. Totally up to you. And of course, if you're looking for voiceovers, you can get in touch with me about that too. Now, back to the podcast.
We work with medical doctors, for example. So physicians have a problem. They don't have time to stay up to date, which is a real problem. It's actually a human lives related problem.
Sure. Yeah.
And if you'll send them, the formal research, scientific article, they would probably not find the time to read it from start to end. But by the way, when we do summaries for scientific articles, we find out that after you listen to 3 minutes and then you go to the full thing, you usually find out that there's nothing there besides details that you don't need to know.
You need. Yeah.
Because you don't really care what was the statistic way of them measuring that in order to prove significance.
Sure.
You're okay with that because otherwise you wouldn't get this article to read, right? So.
Well, you're assuming it's peer reviewed, so someone made an assumption.
Explain, if a professional like you would kind of have a coffee break conversation, they would be able to digest that content for you in 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And then comes the place I think I like the most, which is reading 3 summaries, listening to 3 summaries about something, and then getting into a classroom as the speaker.
Oh.
Which is my favorite, because then I can actually say, oh, there was just an article published on Forbes about that. And I'm giving the classroom the feeling that they are not responsible for not knowing that. And I don't tell them that I didn't read the article. So.
Yeah, it's a great way to sound very intelligent.
so I read, I listened to 3 summaries. It's good enough for me to actually share information about that and show you that I know about it. Good enough to actually have a conversation.
Yeah.
So I'm not the expert of that. But if you listen to 20 summaries about that, you'll start to create an overall idea about that, right? So
yeah,
it's a different type of evolution of learning, and I find it very relevant to these days.
Well, I have to say that, that's how I learned about audio branding. I mean, having conversations with people like you, you have enough of those conversations, you get a summary of what their expertise is, and you bring that to the next discussion.
So I guess the library manager basically hates us right now, but we should move forward and kind of fit to how things are kind of evolving around us.
Yeah, I'm curious as to what the future is for this kind of thing. So it's really good for doctors because, as you're saying, they have they have a limited amount of time in which to learn new information. And summaries like this or summies that give them the audio breakdown quickly can really be a lifesaver. Where else do you see this being important? I mean, just, beyond in general.
So you just explained the idea of doctors among themselves. Yeah. But when you visit the doctor and then you go home, you usually have this puzzled face saying, I don't have any idea what he was or she was talking about, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So getting explanations about everything you need to know about the situation,
Mm-hmm.
it goes back to the surgery instructions and so forth. And it goes to any type of knowledge we need to know, where usually the creator of the content knows a lot more than us,
Mm-hmm.
and it
Yeah.
has to be digested into some kind of a communication, which is kind of more friendly and easy to consume. And I think we basically should, from the creator's point of view, rethink how we create content and look at audio as a new opportunity. And
It
as
definitely hits us deeper.
the rest of us who are actually getting the content and trying to kind of fight with it,
Mm-hmm.
we would really appreciate human beings explaining things to us when we're more available for that, right?
Yes.
So I think
Yeah.
it
And
brings,
in words we can understand.
definitely, I think it opens door to a different type of communication, which is very
Mm-hmm.
friendly, because the digital world is trying to fight for many years with creating a personalized, natural conversation, because
Mm-hmm.
text isn't really the natural
Yeah.
type of conversation we use among ourselves. And video is usually too kind of, when I was filmed in video, I wasn't able to be myself. So at the end, we
Mm-hmm.
just had a recording a few weeks ago, and I think I spent 3 hours trying to understand how to be natural with a camera in front of my face,
It's
and I ended
hard.
not understanding. So we
Yeah.
basically threw everything away and didn't use a minute out of that, because it was
Oh
not.
no.
And I think I'm okay with communicating with my students and my colleagues and
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
forth, but the camera actually changed everything.
It does, yeah. But I will tell you, even audio wise, when you are trying to sound natural, you're trying too hard. That's kind of that's the problem, right? So I mean, it's a classic voice actor problem. We have a piece of copy on a piece of paper that we're supposed to read without sounding like we're reading in a completely made up environment. Like I mean, we're on video right now, so you're seeing me, but I'm in my booth with a microphone in my face and headphones on my head, and you have a pair of headphones on. We're having a good conversation because it's a discussion, and that's great. But when you are by yourself in an environment reading off a page, to make that sound natural is definitely acting. Like there's a way of getting it in your head, of making a scenario in your head that works to make you sound more natural, and that has to follow through also in audio. So I think it's interesting to see how we connect better with people when we feel like they're actually talking to us. That's an interesting aspect of all this.
So maybe it has a point where narration and voice acting should be with an audience in the room.
Hmm.
It would probably cost a bit more, but
Well, I mean,
that's an
it
interesting
depends.
concept, to have
Yeah,
something out there, to somebody there to actually talk to.
it could just be one person. It doesn't have to be a whole audience. but but that's why you would hire a professional. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
because they're trained to do that.
So I have an experience with working with professionals from our point of view, and I
Yeah,
find
yeah.
different interactions there. I find that voice actors who are really coming from acting sometimes overdo the content,
Yes.
and it's kind
Yeah.
of not natural to listen to that. And others are too formal because they're too good at separating their tones, and kind of
Hmm.
it always intrigued me, the idea that usually when I hire a voice actor, they ask if they can breathe, right? It
Really?
sounds funny. I feel uncomfortable asking my employers not to breathe, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's not a thing.
So I'm okay. I'm saying go ahead, breathe. I think one of the best
Yeah.
situations we had is that we sent some kind of a summit to one of our voice talents, and she was reading some kind of a statistic about mobile something,
Yeah.
and it was really funny. So she started laughing out loud, and then she
Hmm.
sent it to me, and she said, "I'm sorry, I'll cut it later on. Just see if it's okay."
Yeah.
And this was my best interaction. It was the best item we ever had because I was starting to laugh with her, and there was a feeling that there's a human being there, which was kind of
Yeah.
the icebreaker I always try to create. So I think
I always
to
thought
one
that,
end there's the professional voice,
yeah.
and on the other
Yeah.
hand there's the authentic voice.
Hmm.
And by the way, one of the things that we started playing with is we created an audio recording app, which is aimed to create an item and directly send it to your audio channel in Summurai.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because we had spoken briefly about that one before too. So yeah, the recording app is a great idea.
So
Yeah.
it started with feeling that it's not good enough because it has some background noises and you don't have the optimal uh, studio and
Hmm.
kind
Hmm.
of noise reduction processes and so forth, even though it's usually used by recording with headphones, which is a good voice cancellation idea, but
Yeah.
it's not good enough. But I think the magic happened when I was in a bar. I went to a restaurant with my wife, and we entered, and there
Hmm.
was, the glasses, the glass voices behind the scenes, and
Yeah.
there was music and so forth. And I just recorded myself saying a quick message, and then I sent it out and kind of uploaded it.
Hmm.
And it was such an authentic moment that even though you're not listening to the best voice, you actually get the situation, which is another thing audio can give. It's not
Yeah.
it's not relevant at any point, but sometimes it will be the game changer.
Yeah. Well, it can definitely make you pay more attention just because you're aware that this is actually a real person in a real situation,
Because I think
you
when we
know?
try to add voices,
Hmm.
right, the unnatural tones to the voice and kind of play with audio stuff, and as an additional concept, it's kind of goes back to kind of the childhood audio stories that we had. It's kind of not really working.
Hmm. Yeah. It sounds like it's a really delicate balance.
And then when you get the boss actually saying what they had to say
Yeah.
instead of trying to read it or to write it or record it or create
Hmm.
a video around that, so they actually just say what they had to say. We have a very natural communication, which is something which it's amazing how it's defined as innovation, even though it's kind of the only thing you would expect, right?
Yeah, it's just people talking to people. I mean, you'd think
So
that
simple.
wouldn't be revolutionary. But yeah, I guess in this digital world, we kind of need to have peeled away the layers. There are so many layers to this. My goodness. Yeah, there's a lot to get into here. But right now, I guess like let us know how we can find out more information on Summurai. You have a URL you can share?
Of course, a Summurai is SUMMURAI.com, and
Hmm.
we're very communicative. So if somebody wants to talk to us, we're not going to send a robot. We're actually going to
Good to know.
talk. Uh, and I think we're in a situation where we've been throughout this journey for 5 years now.
Hmm.
Many processes in the way we did conference summaries and B2C and moved into B2B, and we're going back to a lot of kind of iterations in this endless process of running a startup company.
Hmm.
I think we're here to play. We understand that we're in a very interesting playground, and I invite everybody who's interested in playing with us to say hey and kind of try new things with us. And I know that we're on the right uh, area and we have
Hmm.
something very specific to offer.
Sure.
But I think as we go along, we'll find so many different things we didn't even think about that I'm kind of curious to see where it takes us. And then
Yeah.
this goes back to user experience and interactions between human beings and
Hmm.
everything we're here to do in this planet.
Definitely. I love it. And I'm looking forward to seeing what else you come up with Summurai because there's a lot to unpack there. Yeah. And I love where it's going. So yeah, please do keep in touch and let me know how things are going.
I will.
Okay. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, that's the end of this episode. Thanks for listening. And if you like what you heard, why not tell a friend about this podcast? It's available on all the usual outlets. Until next time.